If I talk over here really loud and I come over here, the mics freak out. So I go over here, I can talk louder again. How many of you in here, so I know where to pitch this. First of all, how many of you have heard me give a talk before? Uh-oh. Okay, I gotta come up with new jokes. How many of you are in here are like production managers or worried about getting stuff to market? How many of you in here cut the code? Okay, how many of you in here are product managers? Are you guys tourists? Some of you didn't raise their hand, I don't know, but we'll get there. Yes, I did not use the template. I'm sure they'll call me out for that later. How many of you saw Unite Berlin? Oh, good. Oh, no. 3 of them actually saw the Unite Berlin talk. So this is actually kind of that talk in condensed format. So one of the things we've done recently is we've actually, we licensed the mixed reality system out to some of our partners, the camera kit and stuff, and they've come up with their own headsets. And you may have seen about half a dozen of them that were released about mid last year, since Unite last time. And they're from Acer, Asus, Samsung, Dell, and these are the virtual reality, mixed reality headsets. Now we still call them an immersive headset or an MR immersive headset. You guys know that we talk about MR, you know what the difference is between AR, VR, and MR in general? Cool. AR, been around a long time, very common, very popular to use on phones, been around since the early 1970s. MR is aware of its environment. We actually know this is a surface we can put stuff on. We can put stuff under the chairs. We can interact with the physical environment around us. And VR is very immersive. And some of the people are still calling MR AR. There is a significant difference. We're not reinventing a term. Stanford came up with that term. But one of the things we want to do is help you guys get all of your stuff and bring it to the masses. We want to help you expand and make it easier for you to get stuff out faster to a bigger platform. So the Windows MR system runs on HoloLens, immersive headsets, and with the help of this mixed reality toolkit, it also runs on iOS and Android devices. So you can create an experience that'll hit all of those platforms from a single Unity project. Okay? We're going to talk about some of the advancements that have happened in that today. Now, oftentimes you look at the tutorials and all the stuff on Unity, and you guys are really good at making 2D and 3D games and assets, and you're familiar with the Unity Asset Store. You know what you're doing. You've got the games figured out. Now, I presume most of you have done games already, right? In basic Unity, you've done games? Some of you? Okay. What did the rest of you make? Commercial apps or stuff like that, like commercial, okay. One of the things that we're trying to get to is being able to use that skill set, use that experience, and be able to produce industrial scale applications in AR, MR, and VR. Now, Microsoft has a lot of partners, and our traditional partners tend to be more line of business application development houses, right? They make stuff like SAP, and they have really good development skills. But when it comes to this kind of stuff, they don't have 3D modelers, technical artists, riggers, audio engineers. So that's where all you guys come in. Talk to people around the industry. There's a lot of work for your skill set in, beyond games. And this toolkit will help bridge some of that gap. You have your ideas, you know what you're doing, but then how do you get to these different app experiences? Not just games, but cross-platform games, right? So if we look at some of the stuff the Holo Toolkit adds, since I was here last year, we've also added the mixed reality design labs. Now these are more aimed at design best practices. How do you do X, Y, and Z? How should you interact with the surfaces? How should you do gesture control? There are a set of best practices in UX. Because in a game, the UX is game-like. People understand that. They're used to doing stuff in games. When we do start doing stuff for an industry or for education or medicine, the UX is fairly specific. And we were finding over the past couple of years there's been a bit of a disconnect, a bit of a gap in what people were assuming a UX would look like and what it's actually like when you are inside the experience. It's very different. A UX for Excel isn't going to work in 3D. Right? You can try it. It's not very good. In fact, a lot of these existing universal applications that run on Windows 10, they'll run in a HoloLens, they'll run in a mixed reality headset. But they're two-dimensional. They're flat. We often refer to them as flat apps. Have you guys ever tried it? You guys ever put on like a Windows 10 headset and brought up Excel or Outlook or IE or something? What was the first thing you noticed? Keyboard input. That sucked, didn't it? Yeah. Yeah. It's like, okay, click, click. Oh my God. Yeah. Well, did you connect a Bluetooth keyboard to the device? Tip number 1, Bluetooth keyboard. Yeah. But what else is, when you have a two-dimensional app, you can position it anywhere in the room. You could hang it right here. And as soon as you walk around behind it, it's gone. There's no back. And if you think to the 30-some years of computing history we've got, on a two-dimensional screen, nobody ever had to design a back for an application. Now we have to worry about that. So the design labs give you best practices for dealing with that kind of stuff. What does a UX look like in 3D? If you're going to have the periodic table and you're going to put it somewhere, well, how should it act and react if you're going to have to use gestures, gaze, voice, or hand controllers to manipulate it? It's different than a mouse. And then the toolkit gives you all the bits to create those things. So the toolkit is almost like assets in the asset store. In fact, you can get it, you can plug it into Unity. It's designed as a Unity plugin. And it adds a bunch of the very common things that we see. So over about the past 5 years or so, we've created a bunch of these types of apps. And we found that there's certain ways where things work and certain ways they don't. If you look at the keyboard, right, it's better if you're going to use gaze and tap to use a keyboard, you need like the magnetic cursor. It kind of snaps to each letter. Like if you've got some of the modern cars and they've got the computer input, there's either a joystick or a touchpad or something and it kind of snaps to each letter. That works a lot better when you're trying to do this. Because believe it or not, your head is constantly moving. Your eyes compensate for that. And as soon as you put on a head-mounted device and try to use a cursor that's controlled by your physical head movements, you notice. You think, oh, my head's pretty still. It's not. It's constantly bobbing around. So magnetic cursors are something that we've dropped into the MRTK, right? Now, attaching to controllers, that was also pretty easy. You just drag the behaviors in there. The bounding boxes, right? So there's a bunch of these things we found that you want to be drag and drop components because we want to accelerate your ability to do this. Now, there's a bunch of stuff in here. There's a bunch of stuff in this MRTK. We're not going to go over all of it. I'm going to, in fact, do this fairly fast and fairly high level because I'm the only thing between you and lunch. But we've got dialog boxes and not on there. The other thing that I was going to draw your attention to is voice. Now, voice commands, they're fairly natural. And if you think about space games or any games where it's going to be fairly modern, even post-apocalyptic or a lot of these applications, one of the things that items like the HoloLens give you is heads-up, hands-free computing. Everybody's seen Star Trek in here, Star Wars. You can talk to your computer. You can ask it questions. Well, that's what the voice commands are for. But it's not just like Cortana Siri or Hey Google. It's not just like those things. You want to be able to give the computer commands. And the MRTK has pieces in it that allows you to say, pick up, move here, larger, smaller, drop. So you can use voice. If you have somebody who has a problem with their dexterity, they might need voice. So consider things like that. And the MRTK makes this really easy to drop in there. Now the voice recognition system is based on Cortana. Very similar structure in how you create it and how you create the commands and how it listens for things. So it's pretty easy to get this blended together. Have you guys used the Cortana system before? A couple of you have. It's pretty slick. And a little while ago, I don't know the exact date, a little while ago, the Cortana Recognition system actually surpassed human understanding in the drive-through order test. Have you guys seen that test? They record people taking orders over a McDonald's drive-through speaker. And if you've ever been on the other end of that experience, it's horrendous. You get background traffic, you get people yelling, you get the engine, you get the wind. It's a rough thing to do it. They used to call it the switchboard test. And the analytics system, the Cortana voice system, is able to actually pick out the order, and it can do changes. Oh, I want 2 cheeseburgers, both with fries. Oh, one of those cheeseburgers with no pickles. And you can pick that up and rearrange that and have one with no pickles. And the audio pickup on that is better than human understanding. So the system works pretty well. I encourage you to try to use it. Just experiment with it. But we've got all these things in here. Dialogue, the bounding boxes is another one for resizing. Because resizing was kind of tricky when we got there. But if you decide to resize something and you pull up those bounding boxes, it's easy to hit those targets on the corners and be able to spin it, manipulate it. And then we also added 2-hand control for using 2-hand gestures. And we'll see more of this in a second. So if you drop the MRTK into what you already know, you can get to these full app experiences, these very rich app experiences very quickly. So this will help you scale and not worry about the fiddly stuff. You can worry about your experience. When you're building out applications like this, the idea behind most VR-style experiences is immersion. You don't want people to have to think too much about how to manipulate the environment because it breaks that immersion. If you're doing a game or a VR training experience or anything like that, the more people think about, okay, I've got to search around on the controller for the thumb pad or the stick or the trigger, the worse that gets. By using the MRTK, a lot of that gets abstracted in a best practice way or a recommended practice way based on the design labs. So it allows you to quickly get to an environment that you don't have to worry about the fiddly stuff. So, go. All of these MRTK examples are built in to show, all the MRTK assets are built with examples to show you how they work, what they look like. We can do resizing, you can see we can do rotation, all the, there's 6+ axes here, resizing, but the bounding box and the app bar are really, I shouldn't say solid assets, but they're really common now. And we found that this tends to be the best way if you're going to be doing manipulations with head and gesture. Putting those large targets out there. The problem we saw early on was that people were trying to make really small targets for people to choose. And even if you have a controller with the laser pointer style imagery on it, it's still hard to hit small targets. So these bounding boxes give you slightly bigger targets to work with, and they're intuitive. It makes sense. The app bar down there is the other thing, and the app bar is a square, right? The MRTK allows you to add things to that app bar. So instead of just resize or reposition, you'll be able to put something in there that will let you overload the controls. And by that I mean, instead of bringing up a bounding box that lets you rotate and change size of something, you might bring up a set of controls that's a radio color menu, or that is appropriate and more realistic for your scenario. Let's go back to the space analogy. Let's say you're worried about spacesuit controls or spaceship controls. You can look at your arm, tap one of those boxes, and bring up an appropriate control panel. Because you could simulate the control panel on the forearm as a series of app bar boxes, and then bring up the map, bring up the radio, bring up the mission settings, or something like that, right? I mean, obviously, put it in your context. But that's the kind of things you can do with app bars and adding controls to app bars. So they're very contextual, and you can make them pretty much whatever you need them to be. Okay? The other thing is the moving and two-hand manipulation. Early on, it was very much one-hand manipulation, but now we do two hands. It's much more natural. We knew that, you know, and this is one of the things we started working on like right away. There comes a point in every IT application's life when you must foist it upon the world, and it may not be perfect. But we knew that two-hand manipulation was coming. So this is built in now. You can take this from the MR toolkit and drop it into your applications. It works as well with controllers as it does with actual gestures and hands. Okay? A lot of the industrial scenarios I've seen would take advantage of this. The issue is that, I shouldn't say issue. The thing we notice, or that I've noticed, is, let's say it's aviation. You're working on something related to aircraft. Heads up and hands-free is incredibly important when you have to do something. There are very few things on an aircraft that you can do with one hand other than throttles, and you need your hands available. But being able to manipulate, say, a schematic diagram with two hands very quickly makes sense, because we're used to pulling things out of a book or turning pages. So that's a natural gesture. So use the two-hand manipulation where it makes sense. Just because it's there, you don't need to use it for everything. There are some things when a swipe is quite sufficient, right? And I'm sure in games, actually, you guys will probably be less prone to this than some of our line of business developers were. But when they got two-hand manipulation, everything became a two-handed thing. Okay, so this isn't a hammer looking for a nail. And I'm sure you guys got that, but I wanted to put the caution out there because I saw it happen with some other people. All right. Now, the holographic buttons. Buttons, when they're in 3D, when they're in your environment, they tend to look and act differently, but that's a good thing. You don't want it looking like a save button. I mean, you can make it have the little save icon on there, whatever you want. But in holograms, in a holographic 3D world, you want them to light up. You want them to stand out. You want them to have depth. Right? So we've got holographic buttons that you can drop into your application. You can pretty much design them and shape them any way you want with the behaviors and the attributes that you drop in on here. And you guys are all familiar with Unity assets. Dropping a game object in. Everything in RTK works the same way. You're working with game objects, attributes, and behaviors. So everything in there just drag and drop. Now, the buttons that we have here, like this is an app bar. And the app bar buttons are going to work very, very similarly to other buttons. But you'll find that your application is going to get a set of themes, a set of behaviors that's going to make it look the same throughout the application. Be consistent. Consistency is so important. If you have something that is a menu or a game, like a game level menu, and you have a certain style of buttons, do that. Don't make some of them red push buttons and some of them app bar looking squares. In the game or in the experience, if you have something that looks like a piece of medical equipment, make the buttons look like they belong on a piece of medical equipment. Don't take square app bar buttons and put them on everything else. So be consistent with the environment. It makes sense to game devs, right? Good. There's some devs we've seen that are a little on the lazy side. Everything is a square app bar button. Now this is probably one of the coolest ones, is the standard shader that we've put into the MRTK. All the things you see here, the different manipulations, are part of the standard shader set. Say that too fast and you get in trouble with PR. But these standard shaders allow you to do smooth clipping. You know, like the clipping one that is there in the beginning. You can put the red edge on it if you want to. You can do the glow, the transparency. You can have translucent plastics. All these things that make sense in a real environment. So this is probably the most useful one you're going to use in here, the one you're going to use the most. And we found that when we're working on industrial applications, when we've been working with our customers, we put about a dozen of these in here that were the most common ones that we ran across. The rounded corners and the squares, the clipping and stuff, those are probably the best ones. That glow, the interior glow, holograms need to glow, right? The hologram. But that interior glow one, you can put it on anything and give it that Princess Leia feel as a hologram. So that one became pretty popular. At least in our teams, it's a very popular one. All right. I'm not holding up any signs yet. Okay. Now, the coolest thing about the MRTK is that it's an open source project. If you go to aka.ms/MRTK, you can download the whole thing, including all the samples, the sample applications. The stuff that is in all these videos are sample Unity scenes that you can open up and just experiment with. We've also included the Galaxy Explorer application. Have you guys seen the Galaxy Explorer one on HoloLens or MR? What do we have? So the Galaxy Explorer is something we built to demonstrate all these things and to practice with these things. Basically, you see the Milky Way galaxy in all of its holographic glory, and you're able to zoom in on our solar system, and then you can zoom in on the planets themselves. So you can see how we did, really smooth spheres in the planets, how we do the selection, the zoom out, the voice control, how we implemented the orbits of the planets. There's even a real scale button in there so that you can see our solar system at its actual scale. If the sun was 1 pixel and it was in the middle of the room, Pluto orbit is about here, actually. It's huge. But our simplified model of the solar system is very different. But that's a sample project that you can download and extend and crack open and see how we did everything. There's also a series of videos for Galaxy Explorer where we built it in 6 weeks. And then week 1, we made a video about what we were going to do, why we were going to do it. Week 2 is about the decisions we made. Week 3 is about the code and how we did it. And we just kind of did videos as we went to show you our process in building these applications. So get the examples, get the MRTK. You will need a copy of Visual Studio, but you can use the free community edition for that. You don't have to buy it, just use the free one. You can use Unity Personal. I'm sure all of you have bought licenses for Unity. Okay, I get it. But you'll need those for a compilation and to put these things together and to see. And it's really good if you all go out and buy a HoloLens. Okay. Or one of our immersive headsets from one of our partners. Enough on that one. Now, we do want feedback. We want to know what else you want us to put in this thing. Now, you may have seen recently kind of a shift in Microsoft's approach to a lot of stuff. We are quite invested in GitHub now. We're not going to change it, but pretty much everything we do of this nature is going into GitHub. It's just, we had Codeplex, but GitHub was there, so why not get that too? Do feedback. Do a pull request on the MRTK. If you see some improvements, submit your changes. Now, we do review them. Okay. Please don't put weird stuff in the comments. It's happened. But we want your feedback. We want you guys involved in this. As far as Unity dev goes, you're the most experienced ones out there outside of Unity themselves. Right? So please, help us out. Okay? We're good. I already said that one. Please make a pull request. How many of you actually do stuff out of GitHub? Okay. How many of you actually change code and submit it? Cool. So, it used to be the open source projects, a lot of people would download them and consume them. A lot of people. And about 1% of them would actually contribute back to those open source projects. That's been shifting recently, and it's great to see. Because this allows everybody to really get across this and to share things that other people might not have been able to experience. So we really encourage you guys to contribute to these open source projects.
Come on, you can do it. Here we go.
So the MRTK, and then it's also just the MRDLs, the Design Labs one that you saw earlier for those best practices and stuff. But this is what we've been changing, some of the things we've been working on. We're really aiming to make this as easy as possible for you guys. And when you build on the Windows MR platform, you'll get across all these devices. You get the VR headsets, you get HoloLens, and with the extensions of the MRTK, you can also build for like iPhone. How many of you guys have seen our build presentations or our keynotes where we have this special camera? Okay. We open sourced the engineering for that special camera. It's just a DSLR, but we put out 3D plans so you can 3D print the mounts. You can mount a HoloLens on top of your DSLR. Showed you how to connect the capture card, put all the software together, so you can do the same thing we do with our special camera. Or you can send it to an iPad and record off the iPad. So we call that spectator view light. But we have the bits in the MRTK that allow you to actually, it's basically you turn an iPhone or iPad into a slave device, and you can have someone with a HoloLens that's doing a holographic experience here, and someone with an iPad here, and see the same thing. And they're even able to manipulate the holograms on their iPad. And then when they do that, the person wearing the HoloLens will see it turn or whatever they do with it. And if you record the information off the iPad, it's a pretty high quality recording. So you might want to use that for recording sample videos, recording your experiences or how-to videos, or just promotional stuff. There's a bunch of other stuff in the toolkit, solvers and things like how to make stuff stick and adhere to any surface and change its direction, how to do surface recognition, manipulation, surface understanding, excuse me, object collections, all that kind of stuff. There's quite a bit in there. It would take quite a bit of time to go through all the stuff in it. Right? We wanted to hit the highlights today. So have a look at that. Get involved. Thank you for your time. This is me, and if you know anything about our company, with that information, you can figure out how to email me.